Hey guys, tonight we journey back, way back, to a desert so wide and quiet you can actually hear the stars if you listen closely. No traffic, no buzzing notifications, just you. A few sheep, and a shepherd named Abram, who's about to have a really peculiar night. You're standing in the middle of nowhere, somewhere between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and above you is a sky stretched tight with stars. They don't twinkle. They shimmer steadily like ancient oil lamps. The desert air is cool now, but your sandals are still dusty from the heat of the day. There's the soft crunch of gravel beneath your feet as you walk toward a simple tent pitched between two palm trees, its flaps gently lifting in the night breeze like it's breathing. A goat snores just outside. You'd be surprised how nasal goats are. Inside the tent, the shepherd is wide awake. He's lying on a woven mat, arms crossed behind his head, eyes scanning constellations. You lie down beside him, figuratively of course, and listen. He's counting them softly, not sheep, stars, 1, 2, 300. And something about this sky-counting ritual feels sacred. Not in a stiff ceremonial way, just peaceful, like his heart's doing math with the cosmos. Now, you probably wouldn't survive this place. No mini fridge, no bug spray, definitely no Wi-Fi. But that's okay. You're here for the story, not the sand fleas. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from a tiny apartment in Tokyo, a rainy porch in Portland, or curled up in a farmhouse in New Zealand, comment your location and what time it is right now. I love seeing where these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The shepherd's name is Abram, not Abraham yet. That part comes later. He's older than you'd expect for someone still living in tents, and he has a surprisingly kind face, weathered like driftwood, with eyes that crinkle more from laughter than worry. His beard's gone more salt than pepper, and he wears it proudly. The sheep out here don't need much managing at night, so he has plenty of time to think. You sit up and notice the only other light comes from a low fire. Just glowing embers now, the flames having given up hours ago. Something in the way Abram looks at the sky makes you curious. He's not just admiring beauty, he's searching, like he's waiting for the stars to tell him something. A gentle breeze picks up. You hear the palm leaves rustling like they're whispering secrets. Abram clears his throat and speaks softly. To the air, to himself, maybe to the heavens. I've done what you asked. I left my father's house. I've walked far, lived simple, followed the wind, but still no child. You tilt your head. Did he just say he's childless? At his age? And that he's waiting for a child in this place? Some commentators wonder if Abram suffered from a kind of spiritual insomnia, not the anxious kind. More like the weight of wonder, a soul that won't fully settle until the promise becomes real. Historically, men like Abram were part of nomadic herding cultures. Think goats, sheep, temporary shelters, and a lot of dried dates. Not exactly the Pinterest lifestyle. His camp would move with the seasons, always on the edge of the next watering hole. A man like this didn't own land. He carried his life in canvas and cord. And yet, he's supposed to become the father of nations? With no child? From this tent? You shuffle closer to the edge of the tent and look out again. The stars. They're still there. Patient. Quiet. Uncountable. I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars, the memory whispers to him again. It's a wild promise. Like telling someone with no garden tools they'll one day grow the world's biggest orchard. But Abram doesn't argue tonight. Not out loud. He just breathes deeply, eyes locked on the sky like he's trying to memorize it, one star at a time. Somewhere nearby, A camel lets out a wet, gurgly snore. It's oddly comforting. You lie back. The mat is a little itchy, but the desert air is dry and clean. A cricket chirps in rhythmic bursts, almost like it's counting stars, too. In this moment, there's no rush, no flashy miracles or loud signs, just a man, a sky, and the first tiny heartbeat of a story so big it hasn't even been born yet. And somewhere, deep inside him, the shepherd stops counting and starts believing. Dusty sandals and goat cheese dreams. The next morning arrives slowly, like a sleepy yawn across the desert. You stir in the tent as golden light spills through the fabric like warm tea. The shepherd's already up. He doesn't exactly rise with the sun. He usually beats it by about 20 minutes. You shuffle out after him, sandals kicking up little puffs of dust. He's crouched over a small fire, coaxing coals and flipping something flat and golden. Breakfast. It's a kind of traveling bread, somewhere between a pancake and a piece of cardboard. Crunchy edges, chewy center, not bad if you're starving, which, in the desert, is often. He tears a piece off and hands it to you, along with a lump of goat cheese that looks suspiciously like it's seen too many sunrises. Still, hunger makes philosophers of us all, and you dig in. As you chew, you hear the distant bleating of sheep. They're already wandering. So is Abram's mind. The air is cool, but you can feel the heat sneaking in under the horizon. It's going to be a dry one. Abram steps to a rise just outside the camp. He always does this, staring into the distance like he's waiting for someone to walk over the ridge. Someone with sandals and a message. You follow his gaze. Nothing but rocks and sunlight. The landscape looks like it was sketched by a tired angel with only one color of crayon. Beige. While the sheep nibble dry tufts of scrub grass, and the goats argue with no one in particular, Abram returns to the tent. Today he's checking scrolls, scraps of family memory, maps, tokens from his old life in Haran. You notice he keeps touching a small object tied to his belt. It's made of wood, worn smooth by years of fidgeting. A tiny star is carved into it. Just one, not thousands. One. Some scholars suggest this was common among ancient wanderers, to keep small personal charms or tokens close to the body. Tiny totems of hope. A wooden star, a sliver of faith, pocket-sized. He shows it to you. This little thing's been in my pouch since I first heard the voice, he murmurs, almost shy. Figured it was easier than carrying the whole sky. You smile. Fair point. The camp is simple but organized. Tent ropes tied with clever knots, water skins hanging from shade poles, a small pit dug for clay pots filled with dates and figs. Life out here is humble, but not chaotic. There's a rhythm to it. You spend the day helping him fix a broken fence, which, to be honest, is really just 3 sticks and some twine that a very determined sheep demolished last night. As you hammer it back together using a smooth stone, Abram tells you about the people he left behind, his father's household, the trade routes, the city markets. It was loud, he says with a half smile. People shouting prices, camels groaning, smelled like cinnamon and feet. He shrugs. I left it for this. He gestures around to the bleached hills, the goats trying to eat a laundry line, the never-ending sky. You don't get answers out here, he adds, but you do get quiet. That evening, the stars return, like loyal old friends. You're stretched out on your back again, feet sore, belly full of flatbread and dates. Abram's beside you, fiddling with his wooden star. There's a long pause between you, just the wind and the occasional sheep sneezing in the dark. And then, he speaks softly. Do you think a promise is still a promise, if it takes a lifetime? You're not sure how to answer, so you don't. You just nod. He seems okay with that. You look up again. The stars haven't moved, but something about them feels different tonight. Closer, quieter, like they're leaning in, waiting with you. Some commentators note that in ancient cultures, stargazing wasn't a hobby. It was navigation, storytelling, prophecy. The sky was the first book. Abram's eyes still trace the constellations, like he's learning to read all over again. As you drift towards sleep, you realize something beautiful. This isn't a man chasing after greatness. He's just someone who was told to walk. So he walks, he waits, he wonders. And while he doesn't have a timeline, he has stars, and tonight, that's enough. The camel who chewed too loudly. You wake just before dawn to a strange noise, a persistent rhythmic chewing that cuts through the desert's usual quiet. You blink your eyes open and realize it's not a bird or the wind, but a camel. A rather large, not so graceful camel, chewing on the edge of the tent. Its mouth smacks loudly enough to wake the dead, or at least a half-asleep shepherd and his guest. Abram rolls over with a grunt, muttering something about goofy beasts with no manners. You quietly slip out of the tent to investigate the camel's late-night snack. The poor creature is chewing on some dried palm fronds, clearly preferring the tent fabric over the natural forage available nearby. You can't help but chuckle. Camels, it turns out, have quite the reputation for selective taste and terrible table manners, even in ancient times. They've been called ships of the desert because of their endurance, but you get the feeling they might be the desert's most stubborn diners. As you shoo the camel away, the first light of dawn spills across the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and soft orange. The desert suddenly feels less vast and more like an old, well-loved blanket, worn but comforting. Abram emerges from the tent, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. He smiles when he sees you dealing with the camel's appetite. "That one's called Jeb," he says. "He thinks everything is a snack, even my sandals." He chuckles, but you catch a flicker of tiredness in his eyes. There's more on his mind than restless camels. Abram invites you to walk with him to the edge of the camp, where the flocks are beginning to stir. He talks about the responsibility of being a shepherd. It's not just about keeping sheep safe from predators, though wolves and lions do lurk, but about leading and caring for a whole community. Each sheep has a name. Each one matters. You find it strangely soothing to watch him call out softly to his animals, his voice low and steady. The flock responds like a well-rehearsed choir, moving as one. It's almost hypnotic. You ask him about the stars again, and he nods toward the fading night sky. "They guide us by night, just as the sun guides us by day," he says. "But there's another kind of guidance too, one you can't see, only feel." Abram's words remind you of a curious fact. Shepherds in ancient times often used simple tools, a staff, a sling, a sharp eye, to protect their flocks, but their true power came from patience and presence. They walked beside their sheep, sharing the journey, not just herding them from behind. Some scholars suggest that Abram's role as a shepherd was more than practical. It was symbolic, a metaphor for leadership and faithfulness, a life shaped by quiet vigilance rather than loud commands. As the sun rises higher, the camp begins to buzz with activity. Women prepare meals over open fires. Children chase each other near the tents. A goat playfully butts a basket of figs, sending them rolling down a sandy slope. You notice a small group gathered around a fire, where an elder is telling stories. His voice is soft, but carries the weight of generations. He talks about promises made under stars, about journeys taken without knowing the destination, about faith that's as steady as the desert itself. You settle down nearby, letting the warmth of the fire seep into your bones. The smell of baking bread mixes with the earthy scent of smoke and sand. You take a deep breath and feel something you didn't expect, a sense of belonging to this wide, timeless place. As the day unfolds, you realize that the desert isn't just a backdrop for survival. It's a classroom, a sanctuary, a place where stories are born and passed on like precious gifts. Later, as you rest against a smooth rock, Abram points to a nearby acacia tree, its branches twisting like an old friend's arms. "That tree has seen more travelers than you can count," he says. "It reminds me that we're all part of something bigger, roots spreading out, reaching for water, just like we reach for hope." You close your eyes for a moment, letting the quiet settle around you. Somewhere between the chewing camel and the whispering wind, you find yourself drifting into a calm rhythm, the kind that carries you gently through the day and into the night. Before sleep pulls you under, you think about Abram's strange, steady hope. It's not flashy or dramatic. It's the kind that grows slowly, like a seed under the sand. And like that camel chewing loudly outside a humble tent, sometimes hope shows up in the most unexpected ways. An unseen visitor and the promise renewed. That evening, the desert hush falls early. The sky deepens from soft lavender to a rich midnight blue, studded again with those countless stars, each one flickering like a tiny lamp set just for you and Abram. You're lying on a worn mat outside the tent, legs stretched out, fingers trailing in the cool sand, when Abram suddenly sits up, eyes bright in the firelight. "I need to tell you about a visitor," he says quietly, voice just above a whisper. You sit closer. There's something about the way he says it, like this visitor wasn't just a traveler passing through, but someone who changed everything. Abram tells you that some nights ago, while the fire had died down and the camp was wrapped in silence, a stranger appeared, not by foot, but by a presence. No footsteps disturbed the sand, no shadows flickered on the tent walls. Yet Abram knew he wasn't alone. "The visitor spoke," Abram says, "but not with words I heard. It was more like a feeling, warm, certain, like the stars themselves were telling me a secret." You lean in. This isn't the kind of visit you get every day. It's more like a dream, or one of those strange moments when the desert suddenly feels alive. The visitor's message was simple but powerful. Abram's promise would be kept. His descendants would be as countless as the stars, shining in every corner of the earth. It's a curious moment, isn't it? No thunder, no flashing lights, just a quiet assurance. You wonder if Abram felt a ripple of doubt, or if, in that stillness, he simply let himself believe. You ask him if he ever felt afraid during this encounter. Abram shakes his head. No fear, just a peace that settled like a gentle breeze. It reminds you of something scholars call the divine whisper. Moments in ancient stories where the sacred shows up not as a grand spectacle, but as a quiet, intimate presence. A breath on the back of the neck. A calm in the storm. This kind of visitation fits well with desert culture, where silence is treasured and messages are often passed through subtle signs. The flicker of a firefly, the sudden stillness of a breeze, or the sparkle of a particular star. Abram reaches into his pouch and pulls out a small clay jar, worn and chipped, but precious. "This," he says, "is where I keep the hope. Not the promise itself, but a symbol. Something to hold on to when the nights grow long." You run your fingers over the cool clay. It feels like holding a heartbeat. Outside, a flock of sheep bleats softly, settling in for the night. The faint smell of roasted herbs floats through the air, and you hear the distant call of an owl. It's as if the whole desert is whispering a lullaby. You think about how often in life the biggest truths come wrapped in the smallest packages. Abram's visitor didn't storm in like a desert storm. It came gently, like the night breeze carrying the scent of sage. As you lie back, Abram's words echo in your mind, descendants as numerous as the stars. It's a promise so vast it almost feels too big to hold. And yet, here in this quiet tent, under this infinite sky, it feels like the most natural thing in the world. You watch the stars for a while longer, feeling their steady, silent watchfulness. Somewhere beyond the dunes, a desert fox pads softly through the sand, invisible but present. You close your eyes, knowing that the story isn't just about promises or visitors, it's about waiting, with hope, patiently, quietly, like Abram counting stars instead of sheep, And tonight, maybe, you count some stars too. He long rode to Haran. The morning sun creeps over the horizon, spilling soft light across the rocky hills. You help Abram pack the camp, folding blankets, securing water skins, and loading supplies onto Jeb, the ever-hungry camel. The day ahead promises more walking, a journey not just across the land, but through time itself. As you set off, the landscape stretches wide and wild, a mosaic of sandy trails, olive groves, and distant mountain shadows. You can almost taste the dry, earthy scent of the desert mingling with the sharp sweetness of wild thyme. Abram moves with a steady gait, eyes scanning the path ahead, but also glancing up at the sky. You realize the stars aren't just nighttime companions. They are his compass, his constant guide through this vast wilderness. You ask him about Haran, the place he once called home. His expression softens, a blend of nostalgia and something like quiet resolve. It was a busy place, he says, markets filled with voices, spices, and the smell of fresh bread. He describes bustling streets where traders bartered and children played in the alleys, a stark contrast to the silence of the desert. Interestingly, Haran was an important hub in ancient trade routes, connecting Mesopotamia with distant lands. Its people worshipped many gods, making it a melting pot of cultures and ideas. Abram's choice to leave must have been as much about escaping noise as following a call. As you walk, you notice small signs of life: wildflowers pushing through cracks in the dry earth, lizards darting between rocks, the occasional scurry of desert mice. Life persists even in the harshest places. Abram tells you about the rituals he remembers from Haran: the weaving of baskets, the offering of simple meals to strangers, the quiet prayers whispered at dusk. I sometimes wonder, he muses, if those little acts were my first lessons in faith, even if I didn't know it then. Some scholars believe that Abram's early experiences in Haran shaped his understanding of hospitality and kindness, values that would guide him on his journey. As the sun climbs higher, you take a break under a scraggly acacia tree. The shade is sparse but welcome. Abram pulls out a small, worn scroll and unrolls it carefully. It contains a list of names: family, friends, ancestors. You can tell each name carries a story, a connection. He traces his finger over one in particular, a woman's name, and says softly, "She taught me about strength in silence." It's a gentle reminder that behind every great story are the people who shaped it. Some seen, some hidden, all essential. The afternoon brings a gentle wind that cools the sweat on your skin. You talk about the stars again, how they helped travelers navigate when roads were just paths through the unknown. They are like old friends, Abram says, always there, even when you can't see them. As dusk settles, the sky transforms into a canvas of deep purples and blues. You find a spot to set camp near a quiet stream, its water trickling like a soft lullaby. You and Abram sit by the fire, sharing stories and simple food. The night feels full of possibility and peace. As you lie down, the stars peek through the tent's open flap. Abram holds his wooden star charm tightly and smiles. You realize that this journey isn't just about reaching a destination. It's about the moments in between, the stars counted, the quiet steps taken. And as sleep begins to tug at your eyelids, you feel wrapped in a gentle promise, as steady and enduring as the desert sky. The unexpected visitor and the olive grove. As the dawn light spills gently over the horizon, you awake to a subtle shift in the air. Something soft, almost like a whispered invitation carried on the breeze. Abram is already awake, sitting quietly near the fire, his gaze fixed on a distant olive grove that seems to shimmer in the early morning light. You follow his eyes and see the ancient trees, their silver-green leaves rustling gently, promising cool shade and the scent of fresh earth. Olive trees, you recall, have been symbols of peace and endurance for centuries, rooted deeply, yet always reaching upward. Abram tells you that this grove has a story of its own. Long ago, travelers passing through would rest beneath these branches, sharing stories, food, and hope. The olives themselves were more than nourishment. They were a balm for the skin, a source of light, and a sign of blessings. As you approach the grove, a soft rustle draws your attention. Out steps a woman, her cloak dusty from travel, but her eyes warm and welcoming. She moves with a quiet grace, and her smile holds a kindness that feels like a gentle spring rain. Abram introduces her as Milka, a relative who has come from a nearby village. She carries a small basket woven from palm fronds filled with fresh figs and bread, a humble gift, but one rich with meaning. You notice that Milka's presence changes the rhythm of the morning. Her voice is soft but steady, and she speaks of daily life, of weaving cloth, tending goats, and the delicate art of baking bread that rises just right. You ask about the olive grove, and Milka smiles, sharing a quirky fact. Ancient people believed the olives carried the wisdom of the earth, and that planting one was like planting hope itself. Some even thought the trees could hear prayers whispered beneath their boughs. As the three of you sit beneath the trees, the breeze carries the mingled scents of earth and fruit, and the light filters softly through the leaves, dappling the ground like scattered coins. Abram tells you about how Milka once helped care for a sick lamb, her hands steady and calm, a quiet strength that inspired him. It's a reminder that sometimes the greatest power lies in simple acts of care. Some scholars suggest that women like Milka, often overlooked in grand stories, were the backbone of these ancient communities, keepers of tradition, healers, and storytellers. You feel a gentle sense of peace here, in the cool shade, surrounded by ancient trees and shared stories. The world outside the grove's protective arms seems distant and hurried, but here, time slows. As you lean back against the rough bark of an olive tree, the soft rustling of leaves becomes a lullaby. You close your eyes and imagine the quiet power of roots digging deep, of branches reaching wide, an unspoken promise of endurance and hope. The day unfolds with laughter and gentle conversation, the kind that fills the heart without rushing the moments. And as the sun dips low, casting long shadows over the grove, you know this peaceful pause will linger in your memory like the taste of ripe olives, subtle, nourishing, and sweet. The starry night, promise night, falls like a soft blanket, and you find yourself back outside the tent with Abram, who points upward to the deep black sky sprinkled with stars. The vastness feels endless, like a quiet ocean of light stretching forever. Abram tells you that long ago, under skies just like this, he was reminded of the promise whispered to him by that unseen visitor, the promise that his descendants would be as numerous as these stars. He describes how, when the desert seems too big, too lonely, and the road ahead uncertain, looking up at the stars brings a kind of calm. It's as if each star holds a story, a hope, a quiet assurance that you're not alone. You wonder aloud if Abram ever felt scared during his long travels. He smiles softly and admits that sometimes he did, but the stars helped him remember something important, that the journey isn't just about the destination. Abram recalls how, when he was young, his father taught him to name certain stars, to recognize constellations as guides for travelers. He talks about how these star maps were like ancient GPS used to navigate the vast and often unforgiving desert. You find it fascinating that ancient people didn't just see stars as distant lights. They saw them as companions, as guides, as markers of seasons and stories. Scholars often note that Abram's promise of descendants as numerous as the stars is both literal and poetic, meant to comfort and inspire those who face long, uncertain journeys. Abram pulls out a small polished stone, a keepsake from his homeland. He tells you that when he looks at it, he feels connected to everything he's left behind and everything that lies ahead. You notice the peaceful rhythm of his voice, the steady crackle of the campfire, and the soft night sounds. The distant hoot of an owl, the gentle rustle of the wind through the olive trees. It's the kind of night that invites reflection, the kind of quiet that feels like a warm embrace. As you lie back on the cool sand, your eyes trace the familiar constellations. You feel a wave of calm wash over you, a gentle reminder that, no matter how winding the road, there's a map in the sky, a promise shining just for you. The stars twinkle softly, like tiny blessings scattered across the night. And as sleep begins to pull you under, you know that this story, like the stars, will stay with you, steady, bright, and full of hope. The Strange Dream, by the river. The next morning, the desert air feels cooler, carrying a hint of moisture from a nearby river. As you walk alongside the gentle current, Abram's pace slows. He stops to stare into the water's glassy surface, his eyes reflecting the ripples and sunlight. You ask him if he's thinking about the strange dream he had the night before. Abram nods slowly. "Yes," he says. "It was unlike any dream I've had. A river, flowing backward, carrying scrolls instead of water. And in the dream, I saw a city far away, filled with people I didn't know, but somehow felt connected to." You smile, imagining the odd, peaceful dream. A river not rushing toward the sea, but retreating upstream. Scrolls bobbing gently on the surface. Abram tells you that in those days, rivers weren't just sources of water. They were lifelines, roads, and mysterious forces. Some thought dreams by rivers were messages from beyond, carrying clues or promises. You mentioned that scholars have long wondered if such dreams symbolized journeys of the soul, or invitations to trust a path unseen. As you continue walking, Abram shares that the dream made him think of a city called Nineveh, a place he'd heard was vast, bustling, and very different from the quiet hills and deserts he knows. Nineveh was indeed a marvel in ancient times, a grand city with towering walls, gardens, and markets brimming with spices and colors. Yet it was also known for its busy streets and many different people, traders, artists, and travelers from far and wide. Abram confesses that part of him is curious about the city, but another part feels hesitant, like stepping into a dream you can't quite understand. You laugh softly, recalling how sometimes dreams feel like puzzles that only unfold slowly. He smiles back, grateful for the company. "Perhaps," he says, "this river and its strange flow is telling me to trust the unexpected." The sound of flowing water mixes with birdsong and the rustle of reeds, creating a gentle symphony that soothes your senses. You pause for a moment, letting the dream and the river settle in your mind, a quiet reminder that sometimes the most surprising journeys begin with a single, curious step. The reluctant journey begins. The sun is warm but gentle as you and Abram prepare to leave the familiar paths of home behind and set out toward the unknown city of Nineveh. There's a quiet tension in the air, a mix of anticipation and hesitation, like stepping off a well-worn trail onto a winding path through an olive grove. Abram tightens the straps on his pack and adjusts his cloak, his eyes reflecting both resolve and a hint of doubt. "I never thought I'd go there," he admits softly. "The city is large, noisy, full of strangers. It feels like stepping into a storm." You chuckle quietly. "Not exactly the peaceful desert nights we're used to, huh?" He nods with a faint smile. "No sandals in Nineveh. More like city shoes, I suppose. But It's the people I wonder about. Will they listen? Will they understand? You tell him about how cities like Nineveh were ancient melting pots, where traders and travelers from many lands mingled, sharing stories, goods, and sometimes ideas that challenged the old ways. It was a place of great diversity, and with that came both beauty and complexity. Abram says he's heard whispers of the city's great walls and bustling markets, where the scent of spices hangs heavy in the air and voices rise like a river's roar. It's hard to imagine leaving the quiet nights for all that noise, he confesses. You remind him that journeys often bring surprises, the kind that stretch us, change us, and sometimes teach us to see with new eyes. Think of it like counting stars in a crowded sky, you suggest, finding your place even when the view is full. Scholars often note that Abram's hesitation is a deeply human part of the story, the moment when faith and fear meet, and the choice to step forward becomes a quiet act of courage. As you begin the walk toward the city's distant silhouette, the landscape slowly shifts from open desert to fertile plains, dotted with fig trees and date palms. The air hums with a new energy, filled with the sounds of distant voices and the promise of discovery. You walk side by side with Abram, the road stretching ahead like a scroll yet to be written. The stars have faded, but their memory lingers in your heart, a soft light guiding you through the unknown. And as the city's walls rise on the horizon, you take a deep breath, ready to face whatever stories await within. The city's whispered welcome. You step through the gates of Nineveh as the sun dips low, casting long shadows over the bustling streets. The air is thick with the scent of baked bread, fresh spices, and a hint of wild herbs carried on the wind. Around you, the city hums with life, a tapestry of colors, voices, and footsteps weaving a story all their own. Abram looks around with a mixture of awe and cautious curiosity. He's struck by the wide market squares where traders from distant lands barter goods, their voices blending into a soft chorus. You notice children darting between stalls, their laughter light as the flutter of bird wings. As you walk, Abram explains that Nineveh was more than just a city. It was a center of culture, politics, and trade, known far and wide for its impressive walls and grand palaces. Yet, beneath its grandeur, it held the daily rhythms of ordinary people, bakers, potters, and shepherds like yourselves, all trying to make their way. You pass a vendor selling woven cloth and spices, and Abram pauses, recalling stories of the city's artisans, people skilled in weaving and crafting, whose hands brought beauty to everyday life. The smells and colors fill your senses, reminding you how alive the city truly is. Abram's voice softens as he shares a quirky fact. The ancient Ninevites used a unique form of writing called cuneiform, pressed into clay tablets that hardened like little stone books. Imagine writing a letter that lasts thousands of years, he says, marveling at the thought. You reflect on how these tablets carried everything from laws and stories to recipes and prayers, a fascinating glimpse into the lives of people long gone, yet still speaking to us across time. Some scholars suggest that Nineveh's wide embrace of different cultures made it a place both rich in wisdom and sometimes challenging for those unfamiliar with its ways. As twilight deepens, you find a quiet corner beneath a fig tree near the city walls. The soft rustle of leaves blends with distant music, a gentle melody played on a reed flute. Abram looks at you with a tired but hopeful smile. The city is loud, yes, but there is a heartbeat here, steady and warm. You nod, feeling the pulse of life around you settle into a gentle rhythm, a lullaby of human connection. Under the fading light, the stars begin to peek through the deepening sky, and you feel a quiet invitation to rest, to listen, and to let the city's stories seep softly into your dreams. The call to speak softly. The next morning breaks slowly, with a pale pink sky stretching above the city. You and Abram find a quiet spot near the city gates, away from the bustling crowds and the clatter of merchants. The gentle hum of daily life pulses softly in the background, like a familiar heartbeat. Abram sighs, running his fingers over the smooth stone wall. "This is the moment," he says quietly. "The moment to speak, to share what I've been carrying inside." You listen, feeling the weight of his words mingling with the fresh morning air, crisp and full of possibility. He explains that his task is not just to deliver a message, but to offer a chance for change, for kindness, for new beginnings. The words feel heavy, but his voice remains calm, steady like the slow flow of a gentle river. You recall how ancient messengers often spoke in soft tones, knowing that powerful messages don't always come in shouts. Sometimes the quietest words carry the deepest meaning. Abram looks at you and shares a little-known fact. In Nineveh, there was a custom of whispering prayers in the marketplace, believing that the city's stones themselves would carry these whispers to the heavens. It's a beautiful thought, the idea that even the quietest words might ripple outward, touching hearts unseen. Some scholars think that the story's emphasis on gentle persuasion rather than force highlights a deeper message about patience and compassion, ideas that resonate across cultures and ages. As you watch Abram take a deep breath, ready to speak, you feel a calm confidence growing in him and in yourself. You imagine the ripple effect of soft words spoken with care, spreading like gentle waves across still waters. The city awakens fully now, but in this small moment, there's a hush, a pause filled with hope and quiet power. And as Abram begins to speak, you settle in to listen, the softness of his voice weaving through the morning light like a warm breeze. The city's slow turning. Abram's words drift through the city streets like soft petals on a gentle breeze. At first, you sense hesitation in the faces of those who hear him, a flicker of surprise, maybe even doubt. But as the day unfolds, something subtle begins to shift. You notice small changes, a merchant offering a smile instead of a grumble, children pausing their play to listen, elders exchanging thoughtful glances beneath wide-brimmed hats. The city seems to be holding its breath, leaning in to hear what Abram has to say. Abram walks slowly through the neighborhoods, observing how the great city, so full of noise and haste, begins to soften in places, like clay being gently shaped by careful hands. He tells you about the city's ancient walls, built to protect, but also to remind its people of their shared strength. You think about how those walls, sturdy and silent, have witnessed countless moments of change, both quiet and loud. A quirky detail catches your attention. The city's massive gates were often adorned with carvings of lions, symbols of power and protection. Yet today, they seem almost to watch over this peaceful transformation. You ask Abram if he thinks the city really understands his message. He smiles wistfully and says, "Maybe understanding isn't a sudden thing. It's more like a slow turning, like the sun rising over the hills, bit by bit." Some scholars see this slow turning as a beautiful metaphor for how change takes root, not in bursts but in patient, persistent steps. As the sun lowers in the sky, the city lights begin to twinkle, echoing the stars above. The air cools, carrying the scent of fresh bread and blooming flowers. You and Abram find a quiet rooftop, sitting side by side as the city hums softly below. The rhythm feels steady, comforting, like a lullaby sung by a mother to her child. You realize that sometimes the most powerful stories aren't about grand gestures, but about small moments of kindness and reflection. And as the evening settles in, you feel the gentle pulse of hope, a reminder that even the busiest places can find peace, if only for a while. The unexpected shade of a vine. As twilight deepens, you and Abram stroll through a quiet courtyard tucked behind one of Nineveh's grand homes. There, climbing a sturdy stone wall, you spot a flourishing grapevine, heavy with clusters of ripe, deep purple fruit. Its leaves rustle softly in the evening breeze. Abram smiles softly. This vine reminds me of the surprising moments in this journey, when life offers shade and sweetness in the most unexpected places. He explains how vineyards were symbols of abundance and care in ancient times, tended patiently through seasons of sun and rain. The grapes, he says, represent small blessings that grow slowly but surely, even in a city full of hustle. You notice the way the fading light plays through the leaves, casting gentle shadows that dance like whispered secrets across the courtyard floor. Abram tells you a quirky fact. Ancient farmers in this region sometimes used a technique called pruning, carefully trimming vines to help them grow stronger and more fruitful. Kind of like how sometimes we need to let go of distractions to find peace. You wonder if the people of Nineveh noticed this vine often, and if it was a quiet reminder that even amidst their busy lives, moments of calm and growth were possible. Scholars often point out that such natural symbols in biblical stories invite us to pause and reflect on the rhythms of life, growth, rest, and renewal. As you sit beneath the vine's soft shade, the distant sounds of the city fade into a gentle hum. The scent of grapes mingles with the cool night air, wrapping you in a quiet comfort. Abram leans back, eyes closed, and you follow suit, letting the stillness fill the space between heartbeats. In that peaceful pause, you realize that sometimes the sweetest stories are found not in grand adventures, but in the quiet shade of a vine, the gentle rustle of leaves, and the promise of tomorrow's fruit. And with that comforting thought, you feel your breath slow, your mind soften, and sleep begin its gentle approach. The quiet forgiveness. The following morning, as soft light filters through the city's dusty streets, you find yourself beside Abram again, this time near the bustling market square. Despite the usual clamor of vendors and buyers, there's a calmness in the air that wasn't there before, a gentle hush beneath the noise. Abram explains that the people of Nineveh are beginning to embrace something new, a quiet forgiveness, a willingness to let go of old grievances and start fresh. He tells you about the city's customs, how forgiveness was often shown through small acts like sharing bread, offering water, or simply pausing to listen with an open heart. You smile, imagining how simple kindness can ripple outward, softening even the hardest places. Abram shares a little-known fact. In ancient Nineveh, some believed that forgiving others was like releasing a bird from a cage, freeing not just the bird, but the one who lets it go. You wonder aloud if forgiveness might be the gentlest kind of courage, the kind that quietly reshapes a community from the inside. Scholars often highlight this theme as central to the story's message, not about punishment, but about healing and hope. The sun climbs higher, casting a golden glow over the market's colorful tents and woven baskets. You and Abram pause to watch a child offer a flower to an elder, their smile an unspoken promise of peace. As the day unfolds, you sense that the city itself seems to breathe a little easier, its ancient stones holding on to this new spirit of grace. And as you prepare to leave, your heart feels lighter, carried by the gentle winds of forgiveness and the soft warmth of a fresh start. The journey homeward. The sun sets slowly over Nineveh, painting the sky in soft shades of lavender and gold. You and Abram begin your journey back, the city's quiet transformation lingering in your thoughts like a gentle melody. As you walk, Abram reflects on the strange path that brought him here, the dreams, the hesitant steps, the soft words that found their way into busy hearts. He smiles, feeling a calm he hadn't expected. You notice the cool evening breeze carrying the scent of olive trees and distant fires, a comforting reminder of home. Abram shares a quirky fact about ancient travelers. Many carried small clay jars filled with water or oil, practical and symbolic vessels to sustain them through their journeys. Reminders that even when far from home, a part of home traveled with them. You think about how this story, like those jars, holds something precious, a reminder that no matter where life takes us, we carry hope, kindness, and new understanding within. Some scholars believe the story's lasting charm comes from its gentle invitation to embrace change with an open heart and a patient spirit. As night falls fully, stars sprinkle the sky, their soft light guiding your steps. You and Abram move through the quiet desert, the familiar rhythm of your footsteps blending with the whisper of the wind. The journey has changed you both, weaving a peaceful thread through your souls. And as you near home, the gentle embrace of night wraps around you, inviting rest, dreams, and a quiet peace. Now, let your breath slow and your mind soften like the gentle night around you. Imagine the cool desert air settling softly on your skin, carrying away the day's worries and whispers of the city's distant songs. Feel the earth beneath you, steady, calm, and welcoming, holding you safely. Picture the stars above, shimmering quietly, their light a soft lullaby that stretches across the sky. Each twinkle is a tiny invitation to relax deeper, to let go of tension, and to sink into restful stillness. The gentle murmur of a nearby stream, the rustle of leaves in a soft breeze, the slow rise and fall of your chest, all blend into a peaceful rhythm. There is no rush here, only the slow unfolding of rest and renewal. Your heart beats softly, a steady drum in the quiet night. You are held, you are safe, and all is well. So, as your eyes grow heavy and your thoughts drift gently away, know that this peaceful story will wait here whenever you return. Sleep now, wrapped in calm and kindness. Whispered good night, dear friend.